Okay, let's dive right into today's explainer, the widow, the word, and the law. We're looking at a landmark case from the Constitutional Court of South Africa that is just absolutely fascinating. It beautifully illustrates how dry, dusty legal text can just crash head-on into raw human reality. We're talking about a widow, a house, and this massive legal battle that all hinged on the definition of a single, everyday word. So here's the central question I want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this. Can the definition of a single word literally cost a widow her home? Think about it, right? We use language every single day without a second thought. But in the legal world, words are the ultimate boundary lines. They decide who gets protected and who gets left out in the cold. In this specific case, the entire outcome rested on what the word spouse actually means. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? Well, as you'll see, it was anything but. Moving on to part 1, the widow and the house, a 30-year home at stake. You know, it's so easy to get lost in high-level academic theories when we talk about constitutional law, but we absolutely have to ground this in the real world of our protagonist, Juleiga Daniels. Take a look at this number, 50,000 rand. To put that into perspective, that's roughly a few thousand US dollars. This was the modest value of a house in a low-income suburb of Cape Town, and it was the main asset in Juleiga's deceased husband's estate. Juleiga was a domestic worker. She actually supplemented her income by selling goods right from the front of this very house. So no, it wasn't a mansion by any stretch, but it was her home for nearly 30 years. It was her ultimate security. Let's trace her journey here, because you can really see the conflict building. Back in 1977, Juleiga married her husband by Muslim rites. It was a strictly monogamous marriage, for the record. Over the years, she chipped in substantially for household expenses and even the purchase price of the house. Then, in 1994, tragedy strikes. Her husband dies intestate, meaning he passed away without leaving a will. Years roll by, and when executors are finally appointed around 2000 or 2001 to wrap up the estate, Juleiga gets a devastating shock. The master of the High Court officially rejects her claim. She can't inherit the house. She can't even claim maintenance from the estate. Just a total roadblock. Section 2, the definition of a word. The legal hurdle. I mean, how on earth could a woman who lived with her husband for almost 2 decades just be told she has 0 rights to their shared home? Well, the answer lies right here in these 2 pieces of legislation, the Intestate Succession Act and the Maintenance of Surviving Spouses Act. And honestly, the irony here is just glaring. These 2 acts were created specifically to protect people exactly like Juleiga. Historically, widows whose husbands didn't leave a will were incredibly vulnerable to homelessness. So these laws were designed to guarantee a widow's portion, kind of like a legal safety net. Yet somehow, Juleiga found herself completely excluded from their protection. The real kicker is how the state was interpreting the words spouse and survivor. They were applying this incredibly strict traditional definition. Because her 1977 union was conducted under Islamic law and wasn't officially solemnized by a secular marriage officer under the state's Marriage Act, the state basically threw its hands up and said it wasn't a valid civil marriage. So in the strict, literal eyes of the law at the time, she was not a spouse. Now, to understand why the system was being so incredibly rigid, we need to dig into the historical context. Section 3, Shadows of the Past, History of Legal Prejudice. Because, you know, the law doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It carries all the cultural baggage of the people who wrote it. And the disconnect here is just stark. In pre-democratic South Africa, courts historically just flat out refused to recognize Muslim marriages. They literally used words like repugnant to public policy or reprobated by the majority of civilized peoples, mainly because Islamic law permits polygamy. They applied this sweeping blanket invalidation regardless of Juleiga's actual lived reality, which was, again, a strictly monogamous union. Her relationship was completely denied basic legal recognition and dignity. Justice Campbell, one of the Constitutional Court judges on this case, really hit the nail on the head here. He pointed out that previous courts were interpreting laws through a deeply prejudiced lens. The lawmakers and judges of that old era, frankly, viewed minority races, cultures, and faiths as inferior. The word spouse had essentially been culturally hijacked to mean one thing and one thing only: a very specific type of Western civil marriage. This brings us to Section 4, a new constitutional prism, shifting the paradigm, because the birth of South Africa's new democracy completely upended that history of prejudice. In the mid-1990s, South Africa adopted a supreme constitution with a Bill of Rights, introducing these massive foundational values. We're talking equality, tolerance, respect for diversity, and non-sexism. This meant all legislation, even the old laws written decades earlier, had to be viewed through this brand new prism.
So when judges read the word spouse today, they are constitutionally bound to promote these values. They literally cannot rely on those narrow, exclusionary definitions from the past anymore.
Writing for the majority, Justice L.B. Sachs delivered this absolutely brilliant piece of legal reasoning. He argued, look, if you just open a dictionary, the ordinary, everyday meaning of the word spouse perfectly describes Juleiga and her husband. Including Muslim marriages isn't twisting or putting a strain on the English language. Actually, the real distortion was the historical prejudice that artificially restricted the word in the first place. By including her, the court is just removing the strain of past discrimination and letting the word breathe its natural common sense meaning. Now, as with any great legal debate, we've got to impartially look at the other side of the coin. Section 5, the dissenting perspective, a different legal route, because the court actually wasn't totally unanimous on exactly how to solve this puzzle. It's important to clarify that every single judge agreed that excluding Juleiga was unconstitutional and horribly unfair. The disagreement was purely technical. While Justice Sachs argued that spouse inherently includes her, Justice Mozenike had a different take. He argued that when lawmakers originally wrote those acts in the 80s and 90s, they definitely, specifically meant a civil marriage. Mozenike felt that judges shouldn't pretend the word meant something broader than the original authors intended, even if those authors were prejudiced. So he proposed a totally different legal fix. Mozenike's proposed fix was this really fascinating constitutional tool called reading in. Instead of redefining the existing word spouse, he felt the court should literally just add words into the statute. Declare the law invalid, sure, but instantly cure it by reading in a new phrase that explicitly includes Muslim marriages. Why? Well, he believed this maintains a strict separation of powers. It fixes the immediate injustice for Juleiga, but leaves it up to the actual lawmakers, the parliament, to go back and write a comprehensive new law.
So we're left with this amazing clash of legal philosophies. Do you creatively reinterpret an old word for a modern era, or do you staple new words onto the old law to fix its defects? Let's get to Section 6, the final judgment, saving the home. How did this all shake out for Juleiga?
Ultimately, the Constitutional Court sided with Justice Sachs and the majority. They officially ruled that the word spouse naturally and ordinarily includes a partner to a monogamous Muslim marriage. No need to declare the legislation invalid, no need to read in new words. They just officially declared Juleiga Daniels a spouse and a survivor under the acts. They basically brushed aside the lower court's complicated legal gymnastics in favor of a clean, inclusive, common-sense interpretation of the English language. The biggest takeaway here for us is the profound, real-world impact of all this high-level legal maneuvering. By looking through that prism of constitutional values, the highest court in the land ensured that a domestic worker wouldn't be evicted from the home she had lived in and helped build for 30 years. The law was finally forced to recognize the dignity and the reality of her life. It's a huge victory. I'm going to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to ponder. This case really forces us to ask, as our society and culture evolve, who truly holds the power to define our reality? Is it the judges who creatively reinterpret the words of the past? Or should we demand that our lawmakers constantly write new words to reflect the present? It's an incredibly delicate balance between justice and the separation of powers. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Definitely keep questioning the words around you.